dan i dobrodošli u novu epizodu Radarovog podkasta. Sad mi smo postavili nekakva pravila da pričamo o kulturi i ovo je već drugi podcast gde ćemo da se bavimo opasnostima rudarenja, iskopavanja i obrade litijuma, ekološkim posledicama svega toga i tako dalje. Sad neki od vas se možda pitaju zašto. Mislim da je odgovor dosta jasan. Mislim, možemo mi da pričamo do sutra o kulturi ako je država u kojoj živimo potpuno uništena. U takvoj državi će teško biti prostora za kulturu i za bilo kakvo stvaranje. Tako da, mislim, ovo je neka vrsta požara, makar ja to tako doživljavam, i sad je vrlo neodgovorno bi bilo da bilo ko ima nekakvu javnu platformu ne priča o tom požaru. Tako da mi je izuzetno zadovoljstvo da sam u Barseloni danas i da nastavljamo ovu seriju razgovora o toj, rekao bih, akutnoj temi po srpsko društvo i region sa profesorkom, doktorkom Marijom Konde sa Univerziteta u Barseloni. Sada ću preći na engleski. Hello, Marta Konde. Welcome to Radar podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Please say something about your academic background to our listeners and viewers.
I'm an engineer by training, agriculture engineer, and then I did other things before becoming an academic, but I did my PhD on conflicts around mining, and specifically in Namibia, and basically since then I've been studying social movements and the strategies they used against mining projects. And I've been linking that work with looking for alternatives and that don't have so much demand of our society, how we produce, how we consume. So strategies to look around degrowth and post-growth alternatives. And right now I'm on a Marie Kiri. I have a Marie Kiri scholarship. It's just been 2 years in the University of Queensland, and I'm now back in Barcelona.
And that's University of Barcelona, Independent University of Barcelona, right?
It's called Autonomnos University of Barcelona, and in a research center that is called ICTA, Institute of Science and Technology Studies.
So this is, at least from my perspective, a perfect blend of engineering and understanding of social sciences, and so you're sort of the ideal person to talk to about what's happening in Serbia, but not just in Serbia. It's happening all around the world. So we're living in an era of so-called green transition. So do you think that is actually green? I mean, the document signed by the European Union 4 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, that wants to reduce carbon emissions by switching from, say, fuels to electric automobiles and cars. Is it really green?
Well, we live in a context of acute climate change, acute climate crisis, so we need to transform the way that we live, the way that we produce, and we need to reduce the CO2 emissions. The question is how we do it. And here's where there's this debate about what is green. I mean, the proponents of green growth, green transition, coming especially from EU main governments and companies, they want to carry on as we are. They want to say, well, we just carry on consuming and producing what we are at the moment. No, we don't need to change the way we live. We just need to do it differently. But they don't want to change it. No, they want to keep gaining a lot of money, a lot of profits. So they've made a new market for them. The new market is the green economy, the green transition. So before we were producing cars, now we produce cars with lithium batteries, no? Before we were producing, factories in one way. Now we're going to turn into, producing a bit more sustainably, but we're still going to carry on producing and consuming in the same way.
And is it as environmentally harmful as the previous models?
I mean, I think it's important that there's a shift in the way that we produce, and we're still going to keep consuming. But I think that the problem is the volume, in a way. It's the volume and the way. the extraction, raw materials extractions in the 1950s has been skyrocketing and going up and up, and this is, and same with energy consumption. It's not going down. In a way, what we're doing at the moment, we're installing all these windmills and solar power plants, but we're not actually diminishing our energy consumption. We're just adding onto what we were consuming before. So fossil fuel is still being extracted. We're still extracting oil. So we're just adding on to the consumption. So we're not. So we need to transition to this renewable energy system. But the problem is that this renewable energy system depends on minerals and depends on infrastructure. And this infrastructure is going to be very destructive where you put it, because you need land to put all this solar and wind energy, and all this mining, as you know well in Serbia, is going to create a lot of impact and destruction. So the problem is that there's not only not enough minerals for this, there's also, if we actually extract them, this is going to create a lot of impacts. So the only way to deal with this is actually lower our energy and material consumption, so we don't have all this pressure to extract. Mm-hmm. And yes, methods of production have improved, but they're still highly impactful. A mine is a mine. You still need to dig a big hole. You still need to cut the forest. You still need to do a processing plant. We can go through it now and talk about it in detail, but it has huge impacts. And there's no way to make a mining sustainable. That's an oxymoron. It's like sustainable development is an oxymoron, sustainable mining is an oxymoron. It doesn't exist. You can try and improve and make methods better, and you should, for all the mines that are there and for the mines that are still going to open. You need to improve and make the methods as less impactful as possible. But a non-impactful mine, it just doesn't exist. Mm-hmm.
But there is also a huge disparity between rich countries and poorer countries in this proposed green agenda, because I feel that the poorer countries are still being used as a resource, and not the same sets of standards apply to the countries that are not wealthy. So we still have this huge problem of distribution.
There's two things here. Mining, it's impactful anywhere. And it's true that environmental regulations in certain countries, like for example, you could say Europe, the US, Canada, Australia, maybe higher standards than maybe in other African countries, for example. But still, it creates huge impacts. Many times it really depends on the mining company who's doing it, who they already have their own standards, and if they don't apply to those standards, they can maybe, the people can complain to them, and there are horrible disasters in many countries all over the world. Papua New Guinea, for example. There's so many examples of how you can do bad mining, and the thing is, this thing of or then in European countries better to do mining because environmental regulations are more stringent. That's not actually true, in the sense environmental regulations are better, but they're still not good enough, and they're still not enforced. Not here, not anywhere. Many times environmental regulations are ignored, or they just not enforced, and this happens everywhere. But then what does happen is that you have a lot more mining occurring outside Europe, and there's been, since the start of capitalism, since the period of colonization of Latin America and colonization of Africa, all these countries, these continents have had resource extraction channel through European and Western cores, and with not allowing them to develop their own economies. And this carries on with the current wave of green extractivism. It's still exactly the same dynamics occurring. The EU and the European Critical Raw Materials Act that they just come out, the Transnational Institute published a research that shows very clearly how they're making all these alliances, these economic alliances and agreements, in order to facilitate the extraction of all these raw materials towards Europe, because Europe wants to ensure it has all the materials it needs for their energy transition. But there's a specific clauses, demands in these agreements, that they give them the materials, the minerals raw. They want to be, Europe wants to be the one that transforms them and gets all the gain from producing, for example, batteries or from producing windmills. They don't want these countries to actually develop their own processing plants and their own engineering, you know, and factories to develop all, for example, windmills and solar panels and all that.
Just to leave the waste.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's really related to current situation in Serbia. We had German Chancellor Olaf Scholz visiting Serbia, and he signed the deal with this corrupt government that actually annulled the will of the people, because a lot of people demonstrated in the streets against this mining company Rio Tinto and their proposal. And then the government said, okay, no, we're not going to make a deal with them. And now they're completely turning 180 and doing exactly the opposite thing, and continuing the project and even signing the treaty with the German Chancellor to do that. So what do you think, if you know about this project and this company? This is sort of a unique situation, because they're proposing a lithium mining process in the middle of a very fertile ground that's connected to rivers that are actually interconnected into the ecosystem that's giving Serbian people water. So is there a way to control the environmental damage?
And this is not a unique situation. This happens a lot, and even with cultural significance for local communities, where there's some areas where they have, you know, for example, in India, you know, there's the head, you know, the god of some community lives at the top of the mountain. There is where they find the minerals. There's a significant connection between the waters, the cultural significance, the fertility of the land, and how people relate to the land. And then that's where the minerals are found and where the mining companies want to mine. And what has happened in Serbia, that the community says no one reacts to it, and then they go down and they wait. They waited. They knew this was going to happen again. Mm. And they knew that then the community lies down. They have they hope that they disintegrate the social movement and the social structure that was created, and then they try again. This is a strategy of the mining companies, and it's not the first time that happens. But yeah, they basically. But that's how also social movement works. No, you have to work in waves, and now it's another opportunity to join together and to push forward alternatives for Serbia. And on what you were saying about the impacts. So the question is, if it has, what impact is going to cause? Yeah,
because it's usually like in Australia, Rio Tinto is mining not lithium, but they are doing mining operations, but in the middle of the desert. And there they caused damage to Aboriginal cultural landmarks that are 1,000 years old. And in Serbia, it's a different situation because this is like the fertile land. So as you say, it's happening in other parts of the world also, but they're telling us that they will develop some new process and the damage will be minimal.
Yeah, it's not true. It's not true. Like the first time I saw a mine in my life is when I traveled to Peru. They had this gold mine, had been opened by Newmont Corporation, a European corporation, had been 15 years operational, and it was at the top of a mountain near to the town of Cajamarca, and it was very green land with lots of local peasant communities living around them. And what I saw there changed basically what I do now, because it was quite incredible the amount of impact they were causing. Basically, there's two sides of this. There's the environmental impact and the social impact, and they're both totally interconnected. So there's different impacts in causes. There's the exploration. There's already impacts causing the exploration, then impacts in the construction, when the mine is operational, and then on closure. And at the stage of exploration, there's impacts on the land, there's the boreholes, they can affect the water, but then already this is causing a lot of conflicts within the community, because sometimes some people want it. What tends to happen in many places is that the mining company buys to give an employment certain people in the community, some others not. So there's already creating divisions in the community, especially politicians. They try and buy the will of certain politicians. And this starts with these internal social, political, and social conflicts and divisions. And then it can happen, like you had in Serbia, a lot of protest and social rejection. That's the best way to stop the mine before it happens, because when it starts, it's very difficult. Then it has the construction phase. The construction phase is the phase that needs most workers. Thousands of workers flood into the area, and that completely changes the area. In many places, like where there's the few people, especially, when you think of places in remote islands and remote areas in Australia, imagine if you have a local Aboriginal community inside, you flood it with people, it changes the way they are also. And so this creates a lot of jobs, but also disrupts a lot of the local structures and local culture of the area. And then the phase of construction is the phase of, you remove all the trees, you dig big holes, because you need to, depends if it's open
it's
pit.
Not an open pit, it's underground.
It's an underground. And underground, it's better in terms of you don't need so much land, it's not so much destruction, but at the same time, you're still going to need to put all these structures, and, you need to put all the infrastructure, all the roads to get there, and you have all these trucks up and down. So they're really disturbing, and then you start seeing the loss of local livelihoods, because the people depend on the land for agriculture, for tourism, for cattle raising, or they just like the way it's the easy lifestyle that you live in these rural areas. That's lost. And then you have the phase of operation, which is a lot less workers, but then you still have the workers operating in the mine. And this generally tends to create a double economy, because you have the people that work on the mines that have a lot of money, because they tend to have much higher salaries than the rest, but then you have the rest of the people who have much lower salaries. So you have like a double economy of people who can afford more expensive things, and then you see a rise in prices of housing, because the people that come from abroad, they can afford higher prices, and you have these local people kind of find affordable housing. And for example, if you want to run an alternative factory or an alternative cattle or agriculture, you hardly find any workers, because they all prefer the higher salaries of the mine.
Oh, so that's a very interesting aspect that nobody is actually talking about in Serbia. So this will create a social divide.
Yeah. It certainly in the area, for sure, because in the area there's a double economy. There's those that depend on the mine, those that work directly, or the families around them, and the rest.
But how is that different from like opening a factory that's not so environmentally damaging?
Yeah. Depends on the salaries. The thing is, mining salaries are a lot higher, tend to be a lot higher than the rest. Even in Australia, which is a very rich country, what I'm thinking now, I've come from 2 years in Australia. This happens in rural areas in Australia where the mining is happening. This happens everywhere there. And salaries in Australia are very high for everyone. But mining salaries are triple. Even an electrician there earns a lot more. So for the people that are in those jobs, they're very good jobs. But for the people outside, it's the worst, because you only get all the bad impacts, environmental, and all the social impacts. There also tends to be a masculinization of the area, because most people going to work in the mines tend to be men. And with men alone, sometimes you tend to see more alcoholism, tends to be sometimes prostitution.
So it shifts the complete social fabric.
Totally.
Of areas, not only like ecologically distorting and bringing havoc to the ecosystems, but also this.
Because it's an underground mine, you have a lot of you're destroying all the hydrogeology underground. And this destroys all the creation of the river system, and all that is completely destroyed. And the biggest thing that happens is the thing is, if it's underground, it will happen to a lesser extent, but you also get some acid mine drainage, which basically pollutes all the river system with high acidity and carries toxic metals too. So this is bad for health and bad for all the animals and that live in the system. And then the final phase is the closure. Closure is very important in the sense that mining companies say they invest a lot in that, so they ensure that when they leave, they're gonna leave it like it was untouched. They're gonna recover it, and you're not gonna see it, especially if it's an underground mine. There's experiences of that happening, but they're very few compared with the amount of mines that have been. Very few experiences where that has been positive or has had a happy ending in that sense, because you need a closure fund. You need to have money saved by the company to close that. That fund tends to be always insufficient. So at the end, who has to step in and pay for this is the state. Public money has to be invested to that. And many times this has to happen for life.
But people are interested also, like, for example, they say, okay, but I live in Belgrade, which is 2 hours away from Jadar or something like that. And will the water be polluted in Belgrade? They don't understand how interconnected it all is.
If the river system is connected, the pollution can carry on a long way. And they will have to put in place systems to collect the water they use and clean it and put it into the river. But they cannot control all the water. They cannot control the water. They also have rain episodes. There tends to be, because they will have to build tailing ponds and walls and this. I mean, there's been a lot of accidents with this, because they take out all the earth, but then they have to treat it. And the land, then all the earth that have been treated, they have created these mounds. And these mounds is where all these acid mine drainage come from, because the rain in contact with that slips out. And you can collect that, but it's very difficult to then treat that forever. And then that inevitably slips down into the rivers. We have a river down here in Catalonia, a mine, potash mine, and it's been polluted, the river Llobregat that feeds Catalonia for a long time, especially with salinity in this case. And we are the ones paying for the cleaning up of the river. And we have 2 massive water treatment plants at the head of Barcelona, and we are the public money paying a stupid amount of money per year to clean this water, but the company is not doing it. And this happens here in Barcelona, and this happens in Japan, this happens everywhere. And obviously in countries like Africa even more, but I think it happens everywhere. And so it's an economic thing, that in the economic issue, that they're gonna have to pay for it forever, and who's gonna get the benefits of this mine? The benefits of the lithium mine, of exploiting lithium, mostly are gonna be for Rio Tinto. Rio Tinto is gonna get the most benefits out of it, and the state is gonna get some royalties, some taxes. They're gonna last the period they last, and then that's it. The lithium for the rest of the world, probably some, for some batteries from some people that can pay a Tesla car or a big car, and that's it. What is in it for the Serbian people? I guess is the lucky ones that can get a job in there. But who can get a job in there? You need probably a very good degree, because now it's very different. The mining that was before what is now. Now it's highly mechanized. You need, especially if you're an engineer, it depends on, you need, very specific degrees or mining degrees to get into the certain jobs. So some people from Serbia will get it, but it's not going to be a huge amount of people.
Yeah, that's like tens or maybe hundreds of people. And on the other hand, we have millions.
You have millions who are gonna, especially the local people, are the ones that are gonna suffer the most for environmental and social causes. And then I guess people in Belgrade will probably experience, it's probably gonna be the economic hardship and the economic impact of having to pay for that mine, the rehabilitation and maintenance of the mine, and maybe the environmental impact of the water if it reaches the water system. They will also have to pay for it because they, if the test, the water testing effectively says this is polluted, they will have to do like we have here.
Is it even possible to clean it?
Yeah, it is possible. Depends on the heavy toxic metals you have, but yeah, you can clean it. You can clean it, but it can be very, very costly. Very costly, and you have to put a massive plant, but this obviously will be at the doorstep of Belgrade. This is going to be certainly nothing paid by Rio Tinto.
So this is also one example, and there are hundreds around the world, and there's been a lot of talk about in some circles about degrowth. So can you please explain the concept, because we are still operating within the framework of capitalism. So whether it's like a feudal capitalism, mafia state capitalism like in Russia, or communist capitalism in China, or like either woke or right-wing capitalism in the Western world, this still is the same framework. It's just different, like maybe what percent of people are on the top in that proverbial 1%. So how is it possible to get to the degrowth phase? But first, can we please start by defining degrowth for viewers that don't understand the concept, maybe?
Degrowth, it's, I think many parts of degrowth, the ideas, I don't think they're new. I think the term in itself has been there like 30 years at the moment. It comes mostly from the European Greens and Germany and especially also the croissants in France. I think it started mostly there with this idea. It's basically the idea that we cannot carry on growing exponentially forever. Our economies can't. It basically there's a complete correlation between growing GDP and extraction and resource extraction. And basically, the more we extract, the more we destroy the planet we live in, and the more we make it more difficult for us to live in with, for example, the impacts of climate change, but also for other animals. Biodiversity levels are dropping down dramatically. And so there's this question of limits on how much can we grow, but then there's also a question of how is this really making us happy? Are we happy with all this growth? There's all these studies that point how you can grow to a certain extent. You need a certain economic stability or level that you have a secure job, a secure environment, a house where you live, and this, maybe access to health, access to education. And once you have these, you have achieved this level, more growth doesn't give you more happiness. It's actually maybe even the opposite, because many times we have all these different options, but we aren't happy because we don't know which one to choose. Oh, we should have chosen that one instead of this one. That many options doesn't make you happy. You go shopping, apparently if you buy a new thing gives you 15 seconds of happiness. And then it goes, this happiness, immediate happiness you get. So it's mostly about what gives you really happiness. Talking to friends, family, spending time with people, reading a book, relaxing. This is what gives you happiness. Having a secure job, a secure house. These are the things that gives you happiness. So more and more, there's more people realizing, this is not only the growth, more people are realizing that, all this frantic economy that we have at the moment of, we need more money, bigger consumption, and that doesn't give you happiness. So I think the growth goes in this sense, no? It has this, it kind of challenges the idea that GDP is not a good measure to see if we're doing all right. We should ignore GDP. We should focus on other indicators. We could have a happiness indicators like Bhutan do. We could have a level of unemployment. This is a good indicator we can keep. Another one is, biodiversity indicators, health indicators, And
also like the awareness of that we all live on the same planet. And that all these things that you're mentioning are first world problems. Basically, people in poorer countries don't have job security, they don't have access to medical care, they don't have the minimum they need to survive. And on the other hand, then we have other countries in the first world that have an abundance. And then in these countries, it's not distributed equally. We have just few percent of the people who have a problem, should I choose this car or that car? But most people can't actually afford a car. Or for my generation, I was joking that my great-grandfather built a building. My grandfather built a house. My father built a one-story on that house. And for me and my brother's generation, it'll be a dog house. That's the limit of our abilities and our economic possibilities. So that's it's a very complicated problem from all perspectives. So maybe for this kind of joy, maybe we need to understand that it's a global community. We are all part of the same.
Totally. And that's the thing, the capitalist system that you so well described before, it's actually what is caused is massive inequality. Because you have this concentration of power and money in a few companies that's been ever concentrated more and more and more. And you have, every time, but the Piketty's thesis, that it keeps growing this inequality gap. And this happens, as you say, this happens globally, nationally, and regionally. This happens at all levels. So we need to tackle it globally, which is a massive, massive undertaking. And in that sense, we don't advocate the growth for the South, for Africa or Latin America. There's certain groups, elite groups in these countries, that it will apply for them. There's certain elites in every country that travel like the jet set. So for them, we could apply this, no? But in general, there's many communities that still need to grow, so they get the certain levels of health, access to health, access to education, and to do it in their own cultural ways, not imposed like we need to do in Western countries. So I think this is very important, and there's already many alternatives coming from the pluriverse in this sense. There's Ubuntu in Africa, Sumak Kausai, Sawaraj in India. There's all many alternatives coming from these countries that we should support and say we are kind of sister movements, no? But the growth is more for Europe or for the US or for Canada, Australia.
Understood, like a corrective for this extreme phase of capitalism.
Exactly.
But are people willing to listen? I mean, these 1%, are they willing to participate in this conversation?
Oh, we don't need them. We don't need the 1%. The 1%, I mean, we can... We're not going to convince everyone. We just need to convince enough people. And I think we have, convinced. We need to talk, and we need to show how producing and consuming differently is going to also help them, no? The most affected are going to be, people in affected by all these mining conflicts, all these I don't know if you heard of the EJ Atlas, Environmental Justice Atlas. It's a map that has more than 3,000 cases of environmental conflicts. We have environmental conflicts all over the world everywhere. These people that become, without wanting it, they become activists because they're trying to defend their land where they live, they're trying to defend the water, the culture. These people don't choose to be this. They just like, oh, I have to do this, and they become experts in defending the land.
Yeah.
And these are the main example, I think, of the growth, because they're the ones that have say, no, we don't want this type of development of imposed big infrastructure projects. We want to organize differently. We want to organize food cooperatives. We want to organize energy cooperatives. Generate our energy locally. We don't want these big, massive projects. And we organize, agriculture projects, and we connect to each other so that in case there's a big rain, we can help each other. They're at the forefront, I think, of this fight.
But do you think this requires an education, further education? Because a lot of people who are affected, they know what they don't want, but they find it difficult to get to the level of knowing what they do want.
I don't know if educated is the word. I would say they need to network. By creating networks. I think that's the beauty of networking. Because when you create these networks, you talk to other people and you realize that your problem is not only your problem, that many people are going through the same thing. And then, you move from this idea of not in my NIMBY. I don't know if you heard of this concept, is NIMBY, not in my backyard. Like they say, oh, many of these people, they criticize, oh, they don't want in their own backyard. It's like, it's not that. You start by defending your backyard. And then when you realize that it's actually a big thing, that it happens everywhere, you start thinking, oh, well, the problem is not that this company is attacking me. This company is going everywhere and is imposing this type of development that is not good for us or for the planet. So then you become realizing that this is a wider political idea, and you start thinking, but this is a matter of, creating all these, inviting people from abroad, creating this podcast, and just connecting with other movements. And I think I think local people, to be honest, I think I have more knowledge, more important knowledge that we should value more. Because they know a lot more about the land, about what it needs, about the alternatives locally, and we need to really value those things. And it's just a matter of showing the rest what they know. I was reading an article just yesterday about this Inuit from Canada, and he was telling about how they live there in their communities and what they suffered during the years. And he's a spokesperson for his community, and he just I just think we should listen more to these local groups, that they just show us a different way to relate to the land, because we've lost this. I feel like me in a city of Barcelona, I've lost this connection to land completely. I don't know how to relate to the land. What you were saying about building your own house, I don't know past changing the light bulb. I'm really useless, really useless. I want to start learning to do ceramics just to feel like I know how to do something, but I completely lost this connection with making things, doing things, living in the land, in connection to nature. It's something we've lost.
But there is a way maybe to awaken that.
I don't know. I mean, totally.
But how is it, like, is it going to end ultimately in the political arena? Do we need to organize politically to achieve those goals on like local or international level? Because, the governments are usually against that. The people are left to their own. There is networking, which is great. But ultimately, is this going to be resolved in a political arena? Do these ideas need to be articulated into politics?
This is a great question. This is what the path of change. How are we going to achieve this change? There's different. You would hear people saying, yes, we need to go through policy making. Others, we need a revolution and overthrow the state. For me, in my opinion, is that we need to try everything. Everything, you know, each person has their own opinions. And if we all go in the same direction, which is, you know, living in a different way that is in agreement with nature and with our peers, so that we can all live in harmony, I think that different strategies are needed. So one path is the political strategy, talking to political parties and trying for them to push for green policies. And it's something, for example, in my organization, Research and Degrowth, we're doing with a more left-wing radical parties. And but then again, it's a minority. But
that's the problem, you know, they get the label radical, whether I think there is nothing radical about what they're talking about.
Yeah.
It's like the way to survive.
Yeah.
It's not radical. I mean,
you're right.
We get labeled as radicals because...
Yeah, I label myself as radical. Yeah, I shouldn't do that.
But it's not, you know, it's just a way, like, how do we survive this?
So yeah, but the thing is, even if the party managed to imagine that we had this project, for example, I don't know if you follow what happened in Chile, no? That they managed to go for a constitution and change the constitution so it will take all these ideas into account, and then the constitution wasn't voted in. There's many lectures you can give to that, but one of them is that they went for a very progressive constitution, and the society wasn't ready. So I think it's very important to have the society, to also work with local groups, with communities, with you know, with society in general. Conversations. And in this sense, all the people resisting projects, infrastructure projects, I think, are at the forefront of this conversation.
This is interesting because, like, I think among all horrible things that Rio Tinto did, they did one good thing, not intentionally, but they united all people in Serbia against them. So all the spectrum, political spectrum, from extreme right to extreme left, whatever is extreme left, they were, now we're united against this company. So the only people who support this project are basically either pawns of the regime or people who have been bought by Rio Tinto in some way or the other. I don't think there are many people who are actually believers of that particular project, especially because it's not even financially beneficial to Serbian people.
Yeah, no. It's very important that there's this Latin American author that talks about the productivity of conflicts, and she actually analyzed this to many conflicts, how conflicts generate all these movement of people that unite to propose alternatives that maybe they were already there, but they weren't valued. You know, agriculture was just taken for granted. It wasn't valued as such. And suddenly, because you have this massive project that wants to destroy everything that was happening there, now suddenly it's like an alternative. Well, it's not really an alternative. It was there. But
for thousands of years.
Yes, but now you have to, you have to champion it and you have to defend it. And this unites people. So it's something good. For example, in my research center, we say a lot like conflict resolution. There's a lot of people that talk about conflict resolution. We don't talk about conflict resolution. We think conflicts are important because conflicts means that you have a company coming in and people rejecting it, which doesn't always happen. Sometimes a company comes in and people say, oh, I can't, I feel so small, they feel marginalized, disenfranchised, and don't react to it. And even though they don't want it, they don't know how this happens. And therefore, a conflict is good because you have local people, creating strategies, talking, thinking, how are we going to stop this? And how do we value what we have here?
Do you think the social media today are doing their worst to divide us? Because I get this feeling that we forgot how to talk politely with the people who have even slightly different opinion.
Yeah.
And it's necessary. I mean, I don't want to talk to people who have the same opinion. I mean, I'm talking to you now and I'm learning because I don't know these things. And I'm grateful for that. And with social media, it's like reducing entire conversations to likes or dislikes, to like 240 characters or whatever it is, and just to this I call it like elementary school vocabulary. You know, I love this, you're that, I am this, and this is like a very, very vulgar way to communicate. We sort of need, that's one of the reasons I chose to do a podcast. I want a proper hour to talk to a person, you know, so to get a meaningful, to create a meaningful context and not just say a few like paroles and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, it's easier because you and me were probably on agreement before we started. And but even if we weren't on agreement, if we had this long conversation, we probably would have found points of agreement. We would have said, because we have a long conversation, we would have said, oh, okay, so you think like this way. Why do you think this way, no? And then, so we would have said, well, I understand. So we will have found places where we will have agreed on, some of the things maybe we wouldn't have agreed on, but then we will have had the conversations, and eventually, if you have a conversation with somebody over time, you know, you can maybe start shifting positions, and you can see more the other points of view. So I think long conversations allow for this. But in Twitter or in this social media, it's very difficult because it's just blah. You throw in... I don't know, I'm not very active in social media, but I have colleagues who were a lot, and now they have left. Because you spend a lot of time trying to carefully argue what you think, and the other ones dismiss it. They don't even engage properly in the conversation, so you wonder who you are trying to convince, because if they're not going to change their minds about how they think, and you're just going to engage in these unproductive discussions, yeah.
I deleted it. I deleted Twitter. I didn't regret it. I had some really good connections, met some nice friends and so on, but ultimately I think it's a tool for the worst impulses in our nature.
Yeah.
You know, that brings out the worst of us. I was looking at it and I thought I was becoming a worse person.
I'm still in there because I find it a useful tool to connect to other struggles, especially mining struggles. But then, for example, the war in Gaza, I know I learn more through Twitter and the people I follow than I learn through the newspapers or media. Yeah. So I find it useful in that sense to connect certain people and to keep each other posted on certain things. No, I can only find certain information through that social media, but apart from that, I don't get into conversations.
Politically, I think people deflate. You know, they waste a lot of energy being online and saying some really hard stuff online. And then when it's time to actually go in the streets and to protest, then I don't have time, I don't have energy, because they sort of wasted their energy online and they think it's activism. I mean, it is. It's a part of a wider picture, but it doesn't end there. It might begin there.
I mean, at the end, any struggle needs multiple strategies. Many strategies is the key. Not one single strategy is going to do it, because you need the political policies, you need the social, and then for the social you need everything. It's not just one, I think. So I think social media, for example, especially for the young people, I think it's actually key, to be honest, in order to spread these ideas. To communicate through influencers is something I have in, we need younger influencers that talk about these ideas and spread them in a cool way that reaches younger generations, which are much more attuned and aware of the impacts of climate change, scared even. I think we need to work on that sense, and because it's coming to us, you want it or not, I think, no? The social media in one way or another.
It's here.
It's here.
So what do we do? Like we have a corrupt government, we have this very aggressive company, we have Europe, who we thought of as an ally, who is now pressing us to begin this operation. We have a really stupid and ineffective opposition parties that are being destroyed basically by the authoritarian regime. And now it's up to us. So you told several very interesting things. So it's listening to local communities, right? Networking, sharing experiences, and different methods of fighting. So everything is
Everything is on the table in that sense. I think anything from writing to podcasting to manifesting on the streets to legally challenging it, tables on the, tables where you distribute information and create these types of conversation. I think locally, many things, but I think you're already doing it. I mean, I admire the movement that's in Serbia. Really, it's quite inspirational. And other people's like, wow, yeah, but people are so energy and so involved in Serbia. We don't have this in other places. So everybody is envious about what you've achieved in Serbia, because it's not easy. It's not easy to mobilize so many people and to commend so many people that are not from the area to mobilize. This is amazing. It's an act from generosity and foresight. So you actually see how it's important that we preserve this area for the rest of the country. Because once you open an area, then it might give place to other mines, and even that mine is going to have a lot of impact on the end of the rest of the country. No, so I think it's such an oversight that it's quite incredible, and so it's just the power of people is the only thing that can stop these projects. People organize because it's not going to come from governments. Governments are like this with the mining companies in Serbia and everywhere. And if anything is going to stop it, it's people organizing. It's what you were saying, sharing, listening to local people, and valuing what we have, and looking at different strategies.
There is this great sentence you said, like, people feel that they're alone. People feel that they're small, and then they cannot do anything or achieve anything. And then by just speaking out and reaching out to other people, they find out maybe that this is happening all around the world. And if we share the experiences, then maybe we learn, and maybe we can redefine the strategy as we go, or the strategies as we go, and maybe get a better result. But this is just the beginning. We'll see on the 10th of August in Serbia. There is supposed to be a big protest in Belgrade. And we will see how that goes, or where that leads us.